Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Gwen Nichols, Chief Medical Officer at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. She's joining us on the program to talk a little bit about blood cancers, talk a bit about the progress in blood cancer therapies, and also just a bit about the impact that COVID-19 has had on blood cancer research. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Dr. Gwen Nichols, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Neil. I'm happy to be here.
Well, give our listeners a background. Of course, I mentioned your position there at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Give us a brief background and talk about the Society's mission.
Absolutely. Thanks. So I am the Chief Medical Officer, which means I oversee the mission of LLS, and that includes our scientific research program, our patient and professional education and services for patients, as well as our Office of Policy and Advocacy. So it's a very exciting and very broad job. My training is as a hematologist-oncologist and as a biologist. And I've been a scientific researcher, both a laboratory and clinical researcher. I've taken care of patients, and I did a stint as a pharmaceutical researcher as well. So I have maybe a jack of all trades, but a broad experience in the world of drug development and science.
Now, when it comes to blood cancers, cancer brings up all types of images. What are blood cancers, and who's affected? How prevalent are they? Give us a brief insight.
Absolutely. So blood cancers are actually very broad. It encompasses a lot of cancers that you might not link together. But the reason they are linked together is that the cells of origin arise in the bone marrow and lymph nodes, which are the blood cells of our body. So these are the immune cells, these are the white blood cells, and so this includes leukemia, lymphoma, multiple myeloma, and a variety of less common but very important malignancies that involve the cells of the blood and bone marrow.
There has to be extensive research done into these many, many different types of blood cancers, each having a different aspect, a different level of seriousness as to a diagnosis. Not that any of the diagnoses are any less serious than the other, I would assume.
No. They're absolutely. And what's most interesting is, in fact, that the blood cancers, because the blood is able to be looked at under the microscope and collected much more easily than many other kinds of tumors. I mean, if you think about a lung cancer, it's a major procedure for a patient to have a piece of that tumor taken out. And so researchers only have a very little bit of tumor to study for any given patient, while in the blood, it's only a tube of blood, and you can have many, many blood cells to study. And so while we are only maybe 10% of all cancers, a great amount of the research that is done around cancer is done in the blood cancer space because the blood is so easily accessible. And I think that's why we understand the biology of the many different blood cancers, and continue to make discoveries in this arena. And it's certainly why I wanted to become a blood cancer researcher, because the cells were so available and you could look at them and you could study them without harming the patient.
Let's talk about some of the treatments for some of these blood cancers. I mean, how has the treatment progressed significantly in recent years?
Well, we're really proud at LLS, and I won't keep saying the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, but because over the last just 3 to 5 years, there have been a plethora of approvals in the blood cancer space, and we are proud to say that I think there are some over 50 new drugs in the last 3 years that have been approved by the FDA for treatment of the blood cancers. And the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society has been involved in the research either at the beginning, the middle, or the end of this progression of development in 47 out of the 53, some number in that range. It's really extraordinary that our funding and our researchers have discovered amazing number of new therapies. And what this means is that we can be more specific now when you have a particular type of leukemia or a particular type of lymphoma or a myeloma, that there are options. Number one, there are different options for therapy. And number two, we can be more targeted in our approach. It isn't just, well, you get this chemotherapy that's a general toxin. We can say, this is the biology of your tumor. This might be a better therapy for you. And that's what we hope the future will look like, that will be less generally toxic and more targeted.
How much research are you involved in that is focused on early detection of many of these cancers?
Well, this is a really interesting area because that's been such an important part of making progress in breast cancer and in prostate cancer and in lung cancer and in colon cancer. So many of the solid tumors, early detection has been the mainstay of increasing survival. We in the blood cancer space have not had the luxury of an early detection. When because the blood circulates so rapidly, the cells are everywhere, so we don't even stage the blood cancers as you would a solid tumor. You know, there's no staging in leukemia because the cells circulate. That being said, over the last several years, there have been some very interesting discoveries of evidence that some of the molecular markers of leukemia may be present in the blood and bone marrow of healthy individuals as we age. And a percentage of those patients, not all of them, develop leukemia. If we learn more, and we have a lot of research in this area, about what are the factors that drive this, why is it only a percentage of patients that go on to evolve leukemia from this, what we call CHIP, or clonal hematopoiesis of indeterminate potential.
That is a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. That's why we call it CHIP. But if you see these signals, if we can understand what triggers the development of leukemia, there is a potential not only for early detection, but for prevention. And while this is yet a long way off, the last couple of years have been incredibly exciting for those types of discoveries. And we also think, this will tie in with the immune system, that how healthy our immune system is and how this is regulated may also play a role in why some people, this CHIP becomes leukemia and others live out their normal lifespan.
With that level of complexity involved in the research on both the early detection and the treatment end of it, how has COVID-19 impacted your ability to research in general and to also raise any type of continued funding? Well,
this is, of course, incredibly disruptive to everyone. And so I don't want to seem like this, we're the only ones who have suffered in this crisis. Certainly not at all.
Absolutely.
But science, if you think about a laboratory, oftentimes there are 8 or 10 people in an 800 square foot space doing laboratory research. There's no way to safely social distance in a lab. And they're also in the midst of hospitals where very sick patients are. And so the physicians and research scientists, the physicians had to go into the hospital and help patients, and the research scientists had to go home to protect themselves and the other people working in the lab. So most labs around the world were closed unless they were doing clinical work for the hospital. So the great majority of research really stopped since March. That, really impacts, particularly wet labs, people who are doing cellular work. They had to put their cells in the freezer and go home.
So, as you said, everyone has been impacted greatly by this pandemic. So I'm hoping that you'll come back and talk with us some more here on Health Professional Radio. Dr. Nichols, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Where can our listeners get some more information about LLS, the Lymphoma Society? Leukemia Lymphoma Society. The
best place is at lls.org. And I really would urge listeners to explore the website, and if you or someone you care about has a blood cancer, we have free information and professionals who will answer questions. And so please take advantage of all the free help we offer.
Well, Dr. Nichols, I appreciate you joining us here on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Great. You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Gwen Nichols, Chief Medical Officer at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, talking about blood cancers, the progress in blood cancer therapies, and the impact that COVID-19 has had on research. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/healthprofessionalradio.